For the first time since the season premiere, this week's episode service reunited us with many of the major characters such as Rick and Michonne. Whilst on one hand it was nice to finally check in with Rick and the gang at their HQ, on the other I feel this episode, like nearly every other episode so far this season, suffered due to mainly being about one man, Negan. After only a couple of minutes of the episode's runtime, Negan turns up with his merry band of saviours to collect supplies from Alexandria, and The Walking Dead once again turns into the Negan show. I know The Walking Dead gets a lot of stick for being far too slow at times, with myself often criticising it because of this. However, I would have actually appreciated it if the show did reduce the pace a tiny bit when going back to Alexandria, and allow the viewer to spend some time with the likes of Eugene, Rosita, Aaron and Carl, exploring the aftermath of Glenn and Abe's death, rather than just skipping this and jumping straight ahead into Negan's arrival. Most of the characters I've just mentioned are relegated to the background so we can focus on another hour of Negan talking. I know I've said this before, but it is kind of annoying that we don't really see many of the characters in The Walking Dead interacting with one another. I mean, when is the last time Rick had a decent conversation with his son Carl? Or the last time we saw Eugene have a decent dialogue with, well, anyone for example? It actually makes it hard to care about these characters, and even harder to believe that they care for one another when they are given so little time together. I guess the problem is now that because The Walking Dead has such a huge cast, the characters that aren't considered top tier, such as the likes of Rick, Michonne and Daryl, are lucky to even have a line of speech in each episode. Anyway, I guess I should get back to this week's focal point, Negan. As mentioned in previous reviews, I actually enjoyed Jeffrey Dean's portrayal in the season opener, but I feel that with each episode that he is on screen, his impact is somewhat diminished. I found him to be rather tedious in last week's The Cell, and this week suffered from that same problem. I feel as though there just doesn't really seem to be much to Negan. I mean, he's a great bad guy, but so far he isn't very interesting. In fact, at this point I actually think that David Morrissey's The Governor was more intriguing to watch, due to the fact that he seems to have a more compelling history and personality. Negan on the other hand is just Negan, and whilst that's great if you want to watch the same thing over and over again, for me his addition to the show hasn't paid off as much as I thought it would. Despite my feelings concerning him, I should note that I did enjoy the fact that a lot of his dialogue in this episode was ripped straight from the comics, which as a fan of the paper version was nice to see. Aside from Negan, the episode also mainly focused on Rick, and once again Andrew Lincoln was superb. I'm sure a lot of viewers were screaming at their TV when seeing Rick seemingly bend to Negan's every will, but it's important to know he's only doing this because he knows that currently it's the best option to protect his group. Rick has seemingly learnt his lesson. He's been far too hasty and hot-headed in the past, and he knows that he now has to bide his time. However, he also desperately wants to smash Negan's head to pieces, as evidenced by the fact that he can be seen seriously considering it when holding Lucille. It's interesting to see this inner conflict play out, and thanks to some great acting it makes for some compelling viewing. There were also some other nice little character moments to be found in this episode. For example, it was great to see Carl stand up to the saviours and threaten Negan, and I hope that his relationship with him develops along the same lines as it does in the comics. I also enjoyed viewing Spencer's growing animosity towards Rick, something that has been nicely brewing for a while, and again this seems to be setting up a major event that happens in the comics, which I won't spoil for those who don't know about it. Rosita is also becoming an increasingly strong character, and I'm enjoying seeing her evolve on screen. And finally, I thought that Rick's conversation with Michonne at the end of the episode about Judith was one of the best morsels of writing the show has produced for quite some time. On reflection, Service is one of the better episodes so far this season, both because of Negan and in spite of him. His presence has caused some decent plot lines to develop between the citizens of Alexandria, and he has been the catalyst for a great performance from Andrew Lincoln in particular. However, he also currently feels like a one-note villain that is growing tiresome very rapidly. Hopefully the show finds the right balance between making him a great bad guy as well as an interesting one soon, otherwise his presence will just go to waste.